Before we get started, I would just like to issue a content warning. This video contains references of sexual assault, underage perv pandering, and abuse. If you find any of these topics disturbing, please take this chance to leave the video now. After being thoroughly underwhelmed with Haramiya in winter, I was looking forward to seeing if the spring anime lineup would have anything decent to offer. One of the first rom-coms to release its first 3 episodes was Higehiro. I shaved, then I brought a high school girl home. You wouldn't expect a show with a name like this to be all that appropriate, but don't worry, it's much worse than the title suggests. Higehiro does what you would expect from a trashy show with a 17-year-old female lead. It presents said teenager wearing a school uniform, and we get to see every detail of what lies beneath her skirt long before we even learn her name. And it uses particularly fetishistic panty shots to ensure that all bumps, lines and contours are on full display to the audience. All of this to say, Higehiro is not reluctant to perv pander with its underage female lead. Seiyu also fills out the role of what a more old-fashioned individual would call an ideal wife. She cooks, cleans, and fetches beer when the main character gets home from work. She's overtly flirtatious and requests sex from our main character multiple times. She's also a lost soul for who the protagonist becomes a figure of guidance and authority, buying her gifts and teaching her not to act spoiled. Ultimately, these elements are present to create a sense of wish fulfillment, to show that Seiyu is the ideal waifu. The fact that all of this is happening to a teenager is bad enough, but here's the thing. Say Seiyu wasn't a child, that she was the same age as our protagonist or even older, I would still mark this show as grossly inappropriate. Seiyu admits from the beginning of episode 1 that despite offering the protagonist sex, she doesn't really want to sleep with him. And to be fair, at no point in the first 3 episodes does the relationship between Seiyu and the protagonist become sexual, let alone romantic. That's about the only points in the show's favour, or rather the one hole of depravity that it didn't dive into head first. These propositions for unwanted sex comes from her philosophy that people only offer kindness in service to some kind of reward. That if she doesn't provide enough benefit to our protagonist, he will kick her out of his apartment, and that the only thing she has to offer is her body and willingness to perform sexual acts. We learn explicitly throughout the first 3 episodes that this comes from actual experience, hopping from place to place, living with men who use her for sex and then kick her out when they become bored. That's an absolutely horrific backstory, portrayed most prominently at the start of episode 3 when we get a very graphic sex scene between Seiyu and one of these men. My main takeaway from this flashback was the dead look in Seiyu's eyes, as she was used by someone who was providing shelter. This history presents some very serious subject matter, and if handled competently, a story like this could be tragic and dramatic. This show could have at least been compelling if the narrative treated Seiyu as a victim of sexual misconduct. So it's a shame that she is instead treated as perv fodder. Saying, "Look at this poor mistreated girl," is hypocritical from a show that 2 episodes earlier showed its audience up that same girl's skirt. At the end of episode 3, Seiyu strips down to her underwear and once again propositions the main character for sex. In a show that took her experiences more seriously, this scene could have come across as intentionally disturbing and tragic. However, in a show that has sexualized Seiyu on several occasions, I can't see it as anything other than another attempt to titillate. Another chance to leer at this abused little girl. An opportunity to fantasize about getting to be the next in line to use her. The protagonist once again turns this proposition down, which is the decent decision, but what sticks out to me is why he turns her down. This grown man refuses to sleep with a child who is dependent on him, has been used for sex, and has admitted to not wanting to sleep with him because he is not in love with her. Because he is not in love with her? Any of the other reasons I mentioned on their own would be reason enough not to sleep with someone regardless of whether you were in love or not. On the first level of this anime's disturbing nature, we know that the main love interest in this harem is a child, I understand that plenty of anime is guilty of this, but it's still wrong and I will still call it out whenever I see it. Just because this is a battle I cannot win doesn't mean it is a battle that I will ever yield. On the second level, this girl is the victim of sexual misconduct at best and downright assault at worst. And by perv pandering, the show essentially joins in on the abuse and objectification of this teenager. Third and finally, this show builds the relationship between Seiyu and the protagonist around wish fulfillment. Seiyu's horrific experiences and the behaviours she exhibits inevitably become part of that wish fulfillment. There is no separating "wouldn't it be nice to live with a girl who cooks for you and brings you beer" from "wouldn't it be nice to live with a girl who is so emotionally damaged by her experiences that she will offer to sleep with you despite not wanting to." As it always is when I discuss shows that mishandle serious subject matter, my point is not that media should never explore issues like this. My point is that they need to be treated carefully, with a level of respect that reflects the severity of the subject matter. I don't know how an appropriate narrative with this kind of backstory would look, but I can certainly tell you that it wouldn't involve fetishizing that girl or framing her history of abuse as wish fulfillment. That is it for this video. I would like to thank my patrons: Orion Tran, Quincy Chamberlain, Jaman5, Lars Espen, Shark, Data52, Nerxu, Pixcalibur, Alberto Cruz, Tyler Bennett, Tenka, and Jeremy Bashik. If anything I brought up in this video has left you in need of help, I have left lifeline numbers for several countries in the description. Thank you all very much for watching, and I will see you next time.